That being said, the past 2 weeks, Dan Freeman and I have had the opportunity to meet, you can hear me now? To meet with elementary teachers, grades 1 through 5, with whom we had not previously met to discuss restructuring. And we did it in 4 separate groups. What we did is we took the GW and the Cornwell School and divided the faculties in half so that we had smaller groups to allow more time for teachers to be asking us questions that they might want to ask of us. Each meeting did begin with a brief overview provided by me to the teachers as to the reason we're discussing restructuring and looking at it. And we touched upon academics, ENL, special ed, class size, professional development, all the kinds of things that we have been talking about. And then we opened it up for questions. The teachers did have a series of questions. I'll just give you some highlights from the meetings. We had in one of the special areas questions about how would we relocate, for instance, musical instruments and things in classrooms from one elementary facility to the other, and what was our plan for moving things, plus what was our plan for moving actually classroom teacher things. We discussed that a little bit in terms of providing boxes, and when I spoke to Tony Vecchione, we talked about, a pod or something where we could move things so that we could have it there ready to go and enter the building as classrooms vacated. One of the big questions that the teachers had was the fact that the contract has a February 1st deadline for teachers to submit to the administration any requests that they might have in terms of possibly transferring to a different grade level. And clearly we're coming right up to that date. February 1st is on Thursday. So I did actually mention to both Barbara Hafner and Dina Gold yesterday at a meeting that we had that was a very real kind of thing, because if a decision is made tonight, people may have a different thought as to what grade they may want to teach and what building they may want to be in. And so we are going to be notifying the staff tomorrow, if the board makes a decision tonight to restructure, that date is going to be extended till next Monday, to give people time to think about it and then potentially put in requests if they were to have some. Along with that was the question of which principals would be at which school. We talked a little bit about the first presentation and the fact that it noted that there were approximately 4 teaching positions that, as a result of combining the 2 schools and equalizing class size, might be able to be reduced. Teachers were concerned with that being excessing. We tried to explain that while most of it is budget dependent, we know that the initial goal going into this was not to be excessing, but to look at those positions in ways that we could provide additional support to our students in the classrooms, whether it be in literacy or math or stellar, because we've certainly heard from parents the need for additional enrichment as well. So that was another topic that pretty much came up in all 4 meetings that we had. Other things that seemed to be of concern were, will integrated co-teaching classes remain at the same ratio there are now of students who have an individualized education plan as students who don't? If we went over the number, would we have to break to another ICT section, which of course we know we would be doing that. So that was a question. There were some questions about ENL and increasing ENL populations and how we might be dealing with that. Lunch recess periods and how would they work was another question. And along with the teacher request about, or comment about the February 1st deadline, was exactly how would we be determining teacher moves for grade level requests, which essentially would be dealing with the same way we have in the past. And it was explained to the teachers that nobody is looking to upset the apple cart and move teachers all around. We would do our best to honor the request if there was availability for us to do so. those, I think, one other area that did get spoken about was social services for students, the kinds of things that we would continue to have to support the needs of students vis-a-vis social workers, guidance, and those kinds of programs. And then finally, we talked about the advantage of professional development and having all teachers on a particular grade level be together in the same school so that they could take advantage of what teachers kind of naturally do, and that is conversations at lunchtime in the hallways, those kinds of things that right now when teachers are across town, for instance in the second grade, those things can't transpire. So I think in general that's a pretty good overview of the kinds of discussions that took place. And each discussion ended with Dan and I sharing with the teachers that if they had additional questions or additional comments, they should feel free to send us a note or give us a phone call. And that's pretty much a review of what transpired.
Does anyone from the board have any questions in regards to the conversation? So I think my only question, sorry, thank you. I think my only question would be, how do you feel the teachers were when they left the room? Were they a little more relaxed in the situation? Were they, I don't want to say in agreement, but what was the overall take, or your opinion of the overall take?
I wouldn't say everyone was relaxed when they left the rooms. I'm hoping that there was a better understanding on their part as to the rationale and the fact that we're really doing this to look at what we provide to our children. I believe that every teacher that we met with understands that aspect of it, and I think they're supportive of that aspect of it. But I have to be honest, are some of the teachers nervous? Absolutely, because change is change, and they're nervous for some of them change for themselves. There was an expression by one teacher in particular about the fact that the change is also for the students, and we will need to address with our students, the change, and I know that we also have to address with our parent population the change as well. So I would say to you that I think there was a better understanding. We did have a number of teachers come to us and thank us for having the discussions because they felt that they were included, their thoughts and opinions were included. And I guess I want to finish it by saying that we did leave by assuring them that if the board decides tonight to move forward with this, that part of the transition plan includes us then going back to the teachers. As a matter of fact, if we're going in this direction, we have a conference day in March. And part of the plan would be to have teacher assignments done by then so that during the conference day we could give grade level teachers time to meet on that conference day in March to begin to have discussions. So we were able to leave the teachers with that kind of a thought as well.
Just got one question. Change, as I say, is hard for everybody, especially some of the children. As they're changing, if we decide to do this and they're changing schools and there's going to be like a child who, is a little apprehensive or something, there's going to be somebody there for them that they can talk to, psychologist, social worker, somebody that can, calm them down, walk them through everything so they understand that this is not bad, that this is good.
I have begun to generate a list of the kinds of things that we would need to consider starting tomorrow based on the decision tonight. And among the list of things that we need to consider are having those meetings with our support staff to talk about that. We do have some children who are more frail than others in terms of dealing with transitions and how they would be able to do that. But I think we also have to recognize that, look, say the primary school is Cornwell and GW is the intermediate. We would have second graders at GW that we need to talk to about a transition too, because they'd be moving to a new school. So it really touches all of the children within the system. And we know we need to be sensitive to that and set up transition type programs to address those needs. That's on the list of what we would need to do.
Vinny, got any questions?
Good.
I'm just trying to write this out. Okay, so though it's not on the agenda, we've reached a point for district residents, Island Park residents, and employees of the district to ask questions in regard to non-confidential agenda items for this evening. So we have about 20 minutes for this part of the meeting, with each question allowing for 2 minutes. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am. Could you just come to the microphone and then identify yourself?
My name is Chrissy Erler. I have one student in Chestnut and the other student in GW. One of my questions is transportation. If I have to leave work, I'm a single parent leaving work at 6:45 in the morning, I drop my children off at a sitter. Is transportation going to be based on my sitter's address or my address?
Transportation is based on your home address as at any time.
So
Always
there's
that's the
no
way it is.
accommodation that could be made for busing arrangements?
Transportation, the legal statute for transportation is from your home, your residence.
Okay, because I have previously sent my children to St. Martin, and they've accommodated me for busing arrangements. So for this being a potential problem, I have already enrolled my children in the bus transportation, which you and I did that a couple days ago, because if I can't be accommodated, then my children can't go to Wisconsin. So that was one of my questions. Another one of my questions is, how much is this potential move going to cost? And has it already been budgeted for? Or what is West Hempstead School District going to lose because of the expense?
In one of our initial presentations, which if you haven't gone online, you can see they're all there. The cost associated with this is one additional bus for transportation.
I mean, the overall move of the buildings, the schools, the supplies.
Yeah, is $66,000 for the bus. There's no staffing implication in terms of this. And so the move, we're talking about the cost of providing boxes for teachers to gather up their things and instruments, and we're talking about using our own internal staff to make the moves for us. So it's not, to us, a huge additional cost, and maybe some overtime, and there may be the cost of, as Mr. Vecchione said, maybe a pod or something outside each school in order to store some of the things as we move them. So it really is not
So what
the
would
cost.
what would the cost potentially be?
What's the cost of one pod, Mr. Vecchione?
I'm saying you're talking about overtime, you're talking about...
No. I said there may be some potential, but we're talking about doing this during the summer months and making the shifts.
About 300.
It's about $300 for a pod, so that's $600.
Okay. Another one of my questions, you're talking about all first grade being in one building, second grade in the same. For a grade, you're talking about teacher prep periods scheduled, so all of the first graders, the teachers are going to have their preps aligned so they can collaborate?
I can't guarantee that every first grade teacher will have the same prep
Yeah, but
every
isn't that
day.
the purpose of this, so that there could be teacher collaboration?
At least once a week, the teacher will be able to meet when they're free. And we have correct terminology, they have it free, where they can meet. So, till we do the schedule, we won't know.
Okay, that was my question.
Christie, I have to move on, since you can come back up if you like, but, do we have any other questions from the audience? Ms. Dennis?
Chris Dennis, a resident. When you mentioned 66,000 for the bus, it leads me to believe that you're tending to go 4, 5, and 6. And we know that 4th and 5th grade has to be 3/4 of a mile to get a bus. 6th grade has to be a mile. Within a year or two, you're going to have parents going, why is my 4th grade getting a bus and I have to drive a 6th grader? Which is what happened years ago when we had a referendum. Do you guys plan on doing a referendum right from the beginning or wait?
What I'm going to say is that's exactly what happens in the middle school now. 6th graders get a bus and the 7th and 8th graders don't. We have plenty of students that are in that situation, and we have, at this point, not done any referendum to change it moving forward. The $66,000 is regardless of what plan. If we chose to restructure in any way, shape, or form, that price is the same, regardless of what the structure would be, 6th grade or not 6th grade.
I
Just so
get
you're
it
aware.
that 6th, 7th, and 8th is different, but that's why it was changed to 4th and 5th, because 1st, 2nd, and 3rd got the 3/4, 4th, 5th, and 6th got the mile, and when we moved 6 up here, we cut the 4th and 5th down.
Right,
Actually,
I
years
understand,
later.
but what I'm saying is, what you're asking about is why does one kid get a bus and not the other one? It's exactly what happens up here, and we've never
But
changed it.
in people's minds, even though you're calling it intermediate, people are considering K to 6 elementary.
I understand.
So that is going to be their issue. It's still their
And that's,
baby.
let's not forget, though, that that's a vote to the public.
Right.
The public could say no. I mean, you were here, it's got to be 6 or 7 years ago, and I can't think of her name off the top of my head, when that woman wanted to change the busing to like less than a quarter, like it was like less than a quarter mile. She
I
wanted the
totally
kids
agree
across
with
the
it.
street from Chestnut Street to be bused, and that was, it was voted down. It wasn't even put up for a, so.
All the studies you guys have done, I know you have your information, have you looked at the cost, if that was changed, what it would increase? And I know you can't tell year by year, because this year we could have fewer and next year more, but do you have an about how much that would be? Because I think the public needs to know that if you're going to move a whole grade down to a new situation.
Right, but and I'm not arguing that point, and I don't know, I have to ask the superintendent for that information, but what I would say again is, you have to remember that if the public is asking that question, the public is also the ones that are making the decision on whether that money got spent. So they may not agree for 20 parents that may be affected by it to change the busing
But
number.
how many parents, other than the 100 people on my email list, know about the 3/4 of a mile? They don't know. that. So
I'm just
saying it's
agreeing
going
with
to
you.
come.
I'm saying if it goes out for a vote on the day of the budget, they may vote it down. Even though we may say, well, it makes more sense to bring them all in
I agree with
in
that.
the same
I'm
bus.
just saying, when you're presenting it as, oh, this is the cheaper model, which in the first meeting, it was presented as the cheaper way to go with the busing.
Right. None of them are cheaper. At this current status, every plan costs the same amount of money for the bus.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next question from the audience? Anybody? Anybody? Mrs. Early, did you have another question?
I had a question about the start time. So 9, 10 would be for which school? Because have you thought about having the elementary program start sooner with all the different studies that have been done showing that high school students learn better starting later? Like, my son's 6, or a 6-year-old that wakes up tired.
I'm smiling because I think that's a great question, because I know school districts that have looked into that, and I know what many of the studies out there say. The short answer to your question is no, this concept of restructuring did not include changing start times from secondary to elementary. It did not. But I know those kinds of questions are out there. I understand, I think the Jericho School District may have done it not too long ago, but that's something that we would really have to look into further if we were going to do that. It is not included in this plan. And one of the things that is the major deterrent from school districts doing that is after-school athletics and lining up start times in middle schools and high schools for competitions, which is, thank you, why it's difficult sometimes to make that switch. Because if you have a high school that starts later, then you get out later, and other schools are out earlier, your competition, so. it's-
Okay. Have you also taken into consideration religious instruction that starts at 4? So would there be enough time?
Yes, we have. We were aware of that, you know, as a concern for any school, any elementary school, being able to close in time for kids to get to religious instruction.
Okay. You keep talking about ENL, ELL. Is there any enrichment programs that are going to be guaranteed?
As we stated at earlier meetings, we are developing a Stellar program to be an enrichment program, including a research component that we want to build from 3 to 12. Eventually, at the high school level, we'd like to get involved in intel research and things of that nature.
I'm
So we're
talking
building-
about the elementary program, which is going to be restructured. So is there any rigor that's going to be implemented in the first through
I
third
don't know what
grade?
that means. How do you implement rigor? What does that mean? I know we're bringing in a coding program, 3 to 9. That'll be a pretty rigorous program because it's self-paced and there's 12 different coding programs kids can get involved in. I've seen it firsthand, and I've seen 8-year-olds working with Python, and it's a pretty rigorous program. So I know we're bringing that in as long as the budget passes, of course. And like I said before, the Stellar program is going to be continue to be developed, with a big piece of it being research.
For the Island Park School District, have you ever thought about reaching out or other things that would entice maybe people to stay within the West Hempstead District? Because if my children are already signed up for the St. Martin bus route, so if this reconstruction doesn't work within my schedule, it's something that my children would then be pulled out of the West Hempstead District for, and then you would be losing, you know, their seat and their funding. So I know that I am not the only person that is potentially thinking of sending their children to Catholic school.
Island Park is kind of a separate issue in that, as you know, the students come to us at the secondary level, but we have been experiencing a steady decline in the Island Park enrollment. I don't know years past what we have done.
It's a secondary level question. Right?
Yeah. That has to do with the secondary school. I'm not sure where it connects to the elementary restructuring. But to answer your question, within the last year and a half, yeah, we have done some outreach. And we have revised programs that we've provided for the students of Island Park. And our high school principal went down and did a fabulous program in Island Park. I'm meeting with the Island Park superintendent on Thursday. So we haven't stopped the outreach. But I don't know at this point if it's going to stop the flow of students to Long Beach, because that's where their friends are going, that's where they're playing sports, that's where they're doing town athletics together, and that kind of thing. So I think the reality is that the funding stream there in terms of revenue is drying up for us. And that's why we need to look at reinventing how we do things here. It's part of that.
Are there any other questions from the audience at this time? Vin, I want to make sure you're still there.
I hear you.
All right, because I can't really see you.
Can't see me?
No. Well, I'm kind of at a bad angle.
Gotcha.
They can see you. Okay. So, you know, we've had this conversation quite a few times. It has been, as Ms. Chris has said, a discussion that's come from central office to us even prior to her being here. It's now been since November that this conversation has been taking place amongst the board and amongst the community, and we really did try to outreach as best we could and do these in large group settings so that more people would be present as opposed to the 6 or 7 people that might attend a board meeting and hear about it that way. We felt that the best way to get as many people out there and get people to ask questions was to have these events in a forum type manner so that more people would be there. And I think as evidenced by our first forum, which was easily 150 people, and as evidenced by our second forum, that even in the snow and the ice that night was still over 50 people. And again, here tonight, you can see that there are people that have concerns and have real legitimate questions. So, you know, we appreciate the fact that you came out and asked the questions that you did over the course of this time. But at this time, I'm going to ask Ms. Chris, really, I'm not putting you on the spot, but I'm going to ask that you give the board what you feel would be your recommendation moving forward.
Sure. I want to begin, though, by saying to the board, when we began this process, it was truly an exploration, and I'm not so sure that even some of my thoughts haven't changed through the process as we've done more research and learned more and spoken to more people. And so I know that the first meeting, there's a whole list of potential options, but the board really asked us to explore 3 and focus on those. And option A was a primary school of grades 1, 2, and an intermediate of 3 through 5. Option B was a primary school of grades 1 through 3, and an intermediate school of grades 4, 5. And option C was a primary school, grades 1 through 3, and an intermediate school, grades 4 through 6. And I suppose an option D would be to remain in the current structure, if you will. At this point, with all of the conversations that I've had, with all of the research that we've done, I definitely would recommend a primary school of grades 1 through 3. And I have to say, at this point, I would recommend an intermediate school of 4 through 6, because I see the possibilities of creating a strong intermediate program that really prepares our kids for those 2 other years of middle school. And I see us being able, as an extension of this, the goal being that in that set of middle school, we would be able to provide more opportunities for our students to actually gain high school credits so that they have them upon entry into the high school in areas such as, you know, studio and art, and completing their LOTE requirements, and also possibly in mathematics for many students. So I would be saying to the board that my recommendation would be option C.
Prior to reading the docket, because when I do read this docket, I have to have some semblance of what I'm reading, because if you took the time to read the agenda, the docket actually has 4 choices on it, so I have to read it out to be amended with the information. I feel like I'm trying to get him to see me, but I know he can't. Can you see me?
Fine.
Oh, no, I'm trying to talk to you, but I can't realize.
I see.
I
Fine.
liked it better when Walter was behind us. So prior to reading the docket, I'm just going to pull across so that I can understand what exactly I'm reading. So at this time, the superintendent, thanks, Ann. The superintendent has given us a recommendation. I'm just going to ask that each of you let me know how you're feeling about the recommendation that she made, so that I know what I'm reading when I read out the document. So I'm going to start with you, since you're at the end.
I'm at the end.
You're at the end.
Okay. Well, I feel strongly that we should take the administrator's recommendation with option C. They've done their research. We've had multiple meetings, and I think this is a proper way to restructure. I mean, I was involved when we went the other way, and those were different times, and now things change. And if this is the best for our children, and I will go along with it. That's it.
Right. Mrs. Close.
I agree, accept the recommendation.
Mr. Cole.
I agree. I accept the recommendation of the superintendent.
I also agree with the superintendent's recommendation.
I agree as well with the superintendent's recommendation.
I fully support the recommendation of the superintendent.
very funny. Okay, so at this time, because I can't read it off my phone. At this time, I need a motion to move docket 7-204, which will read, I, Patricia Sullivan Chris, Superintendent of the West Hempstead Union Free School District of the County of Nassau, do hereby recommend that the following resolution be adopted. Be it resolved, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the restructuring of the elementary schools in the district to be option C, primary school grades 1 through 3, or intermediate school grades 4 through 6. So moved.
Do you want to
Second.
What?
have a question?
No.
You want to list the
I gotta move it
entire-
first. Hold on, I gotta move it first.
No, but I don't think it's complete. I think you should put the entire, district in there, like kindergarten, high school, middle school, I know
Lawyer
that,
wrote
because
this.
because the middle school's gonna be changed, you're changing the middle school, so that's really not in this restructure.
All right, hold on 1 second for that boy. But it says elementary restructuring, then.
Okay, but,
All right,
you're determining
hold on.
that sixth grade is elementary.
Hold that thought. This is gonna be the oddest meeting ever. I'm calling the attorney because he's on his way back from Brooklyn and he's not here yet. Hello. I'm in a meeting. We're still in the meeting. I'm trying to pass this to a docket and we have a question. So I'm gonna put you on speaker for the world to hear, okay? It's the public. I'm in a public meeting with everybody and Vinny on Skype. And I need the legal answer to the question that Vinny just asked, okay? So I'm gonna put you on speakerphone with a microphone. I'm gonna try this, I'm sorry. Hold on. So I have Chris Mustecchi on speakerphone on his way here, I hope. Okay, I don't know if this is gonna work for you guys to hear, but, so the question that Vinny had was the resolution that you had sent us in regards to the 4 options. He wants to know if it should also list how the other buildings are going to be. Like, in other words, does it have to say kindergarten and then whatever option we took, and then the middle school being 7, 8, and the high school?
You're definitely recommended to put as much detail as you want to vote on.
You amended the correct detail.
It's
He
specific
said, oh,
options.
can't read free. Wait, hold on. Go ahead again.
You're definitely free to amend it to put as much detail as you want in the resolution, so it's clear what you're voting. So if there's just a changes to the options that you previously had, and you want to clarify that, you take a motion to amend the resolution to include as much detail as you want, and then you can vote on that specific resolution.
So in other words, I can amend this docket to read that we are restructuring the district to be a kindergarten center, a 1-5, a 1-3, a 4-6, a 7-8, and a 9-12.
Yeah, and so it would be being resolved, same language, and then you would vote on that, and then it's roughly the majority that passes, and that would be that motion would pass. If you don't have enough votes, then that proposal would pass.
But the word restructuring of the elementary schools would come out. It would just be the restructuring of the district.
That's fine.
Okay. Vin, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Okay, so do you want me to amend this docket, Vin?
I would like it, yeah.
Okay, so I'm hanging up on you now, sir. Are you there? Yes. Okay, so I need a okay. All right, thank you so much. Okay. Okay. So I need a motion, which I guess will come from you, Vin, to amend this docket.
Okay. Want me to, you want to, I didn't think.
I need a motion. I need a motion to amend the docket.
All right. So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I need all in favor of amending this docket? Okay, so the docket will be amended to read, the Board of Education hereby approves the restructuring of the schools in the district to be option C, which includes a kindergarten center, primary school 1 through 3, intermediate school 4 through 6, a middle school of 7, 8, and a high school of 9, 12. Okay, I need a motion to move docket 7-204, which reads as amended.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay. At this time, as I'll read again, the board has just voted to restructure the elementary school model to be primary grades 1 through 3, intermediate school grades 4 through 6, middle school will remain 7, 8, the high school will be 9, 12, kindergarten center will remain as it is. I'm going to turn the microphone back over to Ms. Chris, just because I know that you tonight wanted to let them know where, if we restructured, where the buildings would be.
One of the questions that had, two questions were asked. Which site would house primary, which would have intermediate, and who would the administrators be assigned to those sites? We would be having the primary site be at the Cornwell School, and Mrs. Sanito would remain there as the principal, and the intermediate site would be the GW School, and Michelle Nadi would remain there as the principal of the intermediate school. For some reason, people questioned about our middle school administration. Our middle school administration, the principal and the assistant principal will remain at the middle school. I don't know, people thought maybe they were possibly moving, so I just wanted to say, no, they would not be moving.
Okay, at this point, I need a motion from the board to move into executive session for advice of counsel and to discuss personnel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Again, thank you everybody for coming out. I want to remind everybody that Mr. Orlando was here to allow us to post this on the website tomorrow for anybody that was not able to be here. So please let your friends know if they want to know what happened, if they want to hear the information. There was a little comedy relief going on with the phone call. This will be available to you probably sometime tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, good night.
Good night, Jenny.
All right.